Hello and welcome to Sunrise Daily on Channels Television. I'm Kayode Okikiolu, but I'm not alone as usual.
Of course, definitely you're not alone. I'm Ayo Makinde. I say good morning and welcome to the program.
All right. You forgot to add from the nation's capital. Well, I'm here in Lagos. But the issue this morning happened in Rivers State. Really sad one, I must say. And you may have seen that story about the tricycle rider who was shot dead by a policeman as a result of a 100 naira bribe that was demanded by the police and was not given by the tricycle rider. But if we could step back a bit, I mean, just in October, we saw the End SARS protest. And it was a protest that was basically saying, enough is enough to police brutality, SARS-related brutality. And we saw a lot of young people come out, people who had been harassed, who had been intimidated, who had been, violated violently by SARS, and policemen come out to say, we don't want this anymore. So that went on and spiraled into the various panels of inquiry which we're seeing across states at this moment. So it is a period of reflection and trying to get some restitution. And honestly, a lot of people thought that the hostilities and the brutality we have seen in recent times would at least stop for now, and then we'll chart a better course for police and civilian relationship in Nigeria. And then this happens in Rivers State. As you would expect, people didn't take this well, because this is a man that was said to just be going out for his daily business, and he met his death right there at the hands of a policeman who was not responsible with his rifle. Yes, the police in the state say they are investigating, and this man, of course, will be prosecuted for murder. But what now happened in the aftermath also is another challenge, because a lot of people came out to protest. In fact, other people were injured as a result of that protest. And if you ask me, I'm not sure if that message has sunk in, really, for a lot of police officers across the country. Well, we hear time and again that it is some bad eggs that spoil the image of the police. But, I mean, this is beyond a bad egg. This is a policeman that took the life of a Nigerian as a result of a 100 naira bribe. I mean, just putting all that together gives me a huge, huge concern this morning. And just wondering, have we made any progress at all? Ayo.
Well, we are definitely making progress. The question you want to ask is how significant, how quickly, how far-reaching, how deep is the progress we are making going? Remember, Kayode, that during even while all of the protests were going on, we were having situations where people were still complaining while the government had announced that SARS had been ended. There were complaints all over the nation that no, SARS hadn't actually been ended, that there were still some officers parading themselves as SARS at the time. Well, I want to believe that is, done and over with now. So wherever you are, if you have any information about that, or you want to contravene that, or you want to confirm that indeed that has been your experience, you can share with us on social media handle at Sunrise Daily. But that is the official position, and SWAT is being, talked about and worked on and all of that. So, but then if you would also remember, just not too long ago, the Inspector General of Police made that announcement on when he was on an on-the-spot assessment of an occurrence here in the capital city. He said, you have rights too. He was speaking to police officers, that if anyone touches you, you have a right to defend yourself. So, of course, you remember that, when that announcement was made and it made the headlines, my question was, wait a minute, defend yourself? Really? How is it going to be interpreted by the policemen whose image have been battered, whose psyche is still on the fringes? Do not also forget that in Lagos, while the dust of the End SARS protests that you referenced was yet to settle, we still had occasion on the streets of Lagos, I think somewhere in Oshodi, where some policemen were trying to enforce some laws in a way that a number of people were wondering, wait, what exactly is happening? It caused some ruckus there as well, and it was settled. I think it is important for the police to do a lot more in terms of educating their men all over the nation. Because this thing that you see on the screen, it isn't something that just suddenly happened. It apparently means that the activities of the police hadn't quite been checked in some of these environments. The top hierarchy of the police have got the message. The managers of the policemen have got the message. But have the men on the streets, the men sent out, have they got the message? Secondly, we have talked often and often about the welfare of the police. How far have we gone about that? Have we comforted them? Have we informed them that, guys, don't worry, government is working on improving your welfare so they do not so that they can desist from the kind of action or activity that ended somebody's life and brought untold sorrow to that family that is involved? I really don't know where to begin about this, but I think it's about time we looked in the mirror and took very, very drastic steps to ensure that this does not continue. This is Port Harcourt. There may have been others that have not been announced, perhaps those that did not end up in any fatality. But this is what we have now. We definitely want a police force that works for us. We definitely want to have the police. But what kind of police do we want? The same quality, the same crop of policemen that are perpetrating this kind of activities, or the ones that will be as responsible and responsive to the security needs of the people? Many people are afraid at the sight of a policeman, especially because most of the time they bear a gun and the people themselves are armless. They do not have any arms on them. They are free of any harm. So what do we do? Where do we go from here? This is definitely a big assignment for the authorities of the police.
Absolutely. The poor welfare really is never an excuse for extrajudicial killing. So, yes, we do look forward to the outcome of that prosecution of the policeman to ensure that this serves as a lesson moving forward. And speaking of moving forward, well, let's take a look at the dailies for you this morning and see how they reflect the happenings in the country. Well, let's start off with the Vanguard newspaper this morning. Anguish as gunmen kill 16 on Abuja-Kaduna Road. Ganduje rains curses, says killing devastating, frustrating. APC youth leader, district head, 2 others kidnapped. In Niger State, police arrest 2 suspected kidnappers of rescued U.S. citizens. So Vanguard leads with security this morning, which is a huge concern really for Nigerians at this moment. But there's been some response from the Kaduna State government about that killing or the death on the Abuja-Kaduna Road, saying it was as a result of an accident. Had a tire burst, according to the government of Kaduna State. So it's really you said, I said on this case now. But one thing is sure, 16 people died on that expressway, and that is sad this morning. And you see 2 pictures on the front page. One shows Abdurrashid Maina, ex-pension boss, who slumped in court yesterday. And next to that, you see a victim of Rivers riot. We touched on that. The riot was, of course, the aftermath of that killing yesterday in Rivers State. And you see the story on top of the nameplate. Riot as police kill tricycle rider over 100 naira bribe in Rivers State. You find more details on page 7 of the Vanguard newspaper this morning. And there's this one that might pique your interest. We've reduced cost of data by 50%, FG. So if you're a data consumer, heavy data consumer, well, the FG is saying cost of data has been reduced by 50%. But, you know, I got a lot of reactions from people saying, when? I didn't get that memo. So, well, big questions right there. But you might want to find out the context of that story on page 9 of the Vanguard newspaper this morning. A couple of other stories. CBN rolls out new license regime for payment systems. And a quick look at sports news. FIFA rankings. Eagles end year in 35th position. So yeah, that's how the Super Eagles end the year. I'm sure that's unconnected with that performance against Sierra Leone. A lot of Nigerians thought it was, home and dry, only for Sierra Leone to equalize. So that's what you get. A couple of other stories, really. But we'll leave it there for Vanguard newspaper this morning.
We flip to the Nigerian Tribune, which leads with COVID-19 hits army, GOC dies. Definitely not something very exciting that you want to see, but that is what has happened. Chief of Army Staff Conference cancelled. Participants directed to self-isolate. Buratai bars officers from attending son's wedding. El Rufai directs civil servants for compulsory test. May impose another lockdown. Isolation centers geared for full work as Nigeria records 2,709 cases in 6 days. This is quite interesting because while we continue life is back to normal, gradually COVID-19 figures are rising again. Remember, the president has said, with our economy as delicate as it is, we can't afford another lockdown, because it was as a result of the first lockdown that we slid into the recession that we're struggling to get out of now. Another lockdown? Whoa, I can't even imagine. So perhaps this underscores one thing that is important, which is that we all should play our part, wear face masks, wash your hands, clean your hands with hand sanitizer and stuff like that. Those things are very important. Right above the nameplate, one of the stories that we highlighted, and the other one also on the front page of the previous paper. Riot in Port Harcourt as policeman kills a motorcyclist over 100 naira bribe. Find the story on page 27 of the Nigerian Tribune. 16 killed on Abuja-Kaduna Highway. Ganduje curses gunmen. That story is right there on the front page. World Bank says 20 million more Nigerians may fall into poverty. Wow. This is definitely something worth taking a good look at, especially when the federal government had been saying through the ESP, the Economic Sustainability Plan, they intend to put something in the region of 2.3 trillion naira into the hands of Nigerians over 12 months, I think from August of this year from September of this year to August of next year. How far so far? I guess we also have to ensure that we follow the money, as they say. That story is on page 6 with those $1.5 billion loan until further devaluation. That's the Nigerian Tribune this morning, Cody.
Well, let's take a look at front page of the Daily Trust for you. Leads with that one that Nigerian Tribune also leads with. General Irefin dies, Buratai senior officers in isolation. That's related to COVID-19, of course. FG accuses religious leaders of making gatherings breeding grounds. That's the Daily Trust's front page for you. And El Rufai threatens lockdown. In fact, if you follow the presidential task force on COVID-19, there's a possibility that isolation centers will be reopened across the country. And when you look at the figures, really, I think it's time for us to really wake up to the reality. We had over 600 cases, I think 675 cases recorded yesterday. By the way, the last time we had this much cases was as far back as June. So we're seeing the cases climb steadily. At that time, we had 684. And then, of course, it spiked and then went down. And now we are climbing so fast. I'm not sure where this is headed, but it's important to raise that alarm. Yes, I say alarm because we need to raise the alarm that we're headed for something we might not be prepared for, really. And it's important not to throw caution to the wind. Yes, I see people around, like you said, acting like, this is done and dusted, but it isn't. So let us be careful. I kind of stress that. And you see Maina collapses in court, fleeing son arrested. So the pictures on the front page try to do justice to what happened. I mean, this is a scene that Nigerians are probably all too familiar with at the court. So we'll see how this one plays out. Lagos new airport terminal ready February. So yes, if you fly, this might be good news for you. It's on page 18. But that's Daily Trust newspaper.
Well, the Leadership newspaper is next, and it leads with perhaps a solution. COVID-19, 286 pharmaceutical firms apply for CBN's 100 billion naira fund. Well, I guess we can be hopeful with this one. As FG sets up technical committee, targets 20 million vaccine dosage. 4 states account for 64% tests. That's coming from the PTF. Army suspends confab, confirms senior officer's death from virus infection. Same story we have highlighted in the past 2 papers this morning on the front page of the Leadership Friday. And a number of other stories. By the way, there's something, Carter, you might be interested in that I didn't mention on the back page of the Nigerian Tribune. Joshua to bag 10 million pounds from Pulev showdown. I won't attend the fight. That's Tyson Fury. Well, it's the money, actually, that's gotten me interested. Well, that's the Leadership newspaper this morning, Carter.
Well, you are interested, really. For me, well, you know, it's okay. We'll see how that plays out. But take a look at the Guardian newspaper. The lead story concerns rail. Yes, Lagos-Ibadan rail service in costly, unfriendly takeoff. That's how the Guardian captions it this morning. Nigerians decry high fares. I mean, you recall there was a statement put out about the range from 3,000 to, I think, 6,000 regarding on which of the areas of the train, which of the tiers you're riding in. Take a ride before you complain, NRC reacts. Government should consider social benefits, LCCI. So there's this classic, argument. Is this a social thing, or it's meant to be capitalist? Are we meant to make money off it, or it's meant to facilitate transport, which will, of course, as they say, have a ripple effect on business? Really, the conversation continues. But in the meantime, let me show you this one. NAS versus Buhari, Nigerian constitution on trial. Lawyers insist. AGF did not act in good faith, says San. Failure to appear will breach constitutional provisions. Malami is correct. Another lawyer counters. Minister's advice will ridicule you. Reps caucus tells Buhari. House leadership says it can't compel Buhari. And, just before we forget, the president did not appear before the National Assembly yesterday, which is why we have that story. That's The Guardian for you.
Well, the Blueprint newspaper this morning seems to take off from where the Guardian left off on that story. Reps summon. Buhari off to Dora. Absence sparks fresh row. That doesn't seem to be going anywhere anytime soon. We didn't act in error, House replies Malami. President's absence a disservice. Malami's comment worrisome, according to the PDP caucus. Service chiefs should address National Assembly, not Buhari, ex-minority leader. We're still waiting to hear from Mr. President. That's according to the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Biamila. Well, right beside the nameplate, getting Electoral Act amendment, my top priority. That's according to the INEC chair, Yakubu, who's just been signed up for a second term. 2023 zoning not yet on PDP agenda. That's according to Secondus, says party still studying 2019 defeat. That's the way the Blueprint newspaper puts it this morning. You might want to get a copy to get all the details. That's the Blueprint this morning.
Well, take a look at Nigeria News Direct's politics for you. 2023, Jonathan others free to seek for PDP ticket. Secondus says Buhari afraid to face Nigerians, responding, of course, to that invitation by the House of Representatives. You see more details on page 3, and you see population census. Nasarawa remains most short-changed state. That's coming from the governor, I believe, in case you're wondering in what context. You find more details on page 3. That's Nigerian News Direct.
Well, the Daily Independent this morning, I guess the Daily Independent is also interested in politics and is leading with this one. How Tinubu was schemed out in battle for soul of APC. The details you will find from the front page of the Daily Independent this morning continues on the inside pages. Party postpones nationwide membership registration. Governor May Malabuni others to be inaugurated today. That's what the paper leads with this morning. You may want to look on the inside pages. Labour to tackle governors over plan to borrow from 17 trillion naira pension fund. I guess, there is a need to educate people on this because, if you listen to the papers, if you watched it or saw any of the papers yesterday, you'll see one of them talking about the AFDB advising that the government of Africa should look in the direction of the pension fund to try to jumpstart their economy. And now this, Labour to tackle governors over plan to borrow from 17 trillion naira pension fund. Find out all the details. It's on page 5. FG is broke. Nobody is in charge of governance. That's according to the PDP. I guess this is something you might also want to find out what exactly is happening. FG fears second wave, asks COVID-19 isolation centers to reopen. Army General dies from coronavirus in Abuja. Find out all of the details of this on the inside pages. We have powers to invite Buhari. Reps tell Malami. A number of writers, follow that one. The story is on the inside pages, continues on the inside pages of the Daily Independent this morning. And that's the Daily Independent today.
Well, we have one more daily for you, and that's the Daily Times. Leads with World Bank ties growth to bold reforms in Nigeria. So what kind of reforms are we looking at? Well, I believe page 5 might do justice to that one. Definitely, Nigeria is in need of growth. You've seen the GDP figures. Nigeria is in a recession, so growth is what we're looking for. Not just, the little growth, but, exponential growth. So page 5. But quickly, let me touch on this one. Ghana election. Ghana's main opposition party rejects poll results. That's classic, right? We've seen that play out in the United States. It's still playing out, really. And now in Ghana. So you wonder, what is this thing about elections and people questioning the credibility of elections? Well, that's a discussion for another day. So that's the Daily Times for you. And that's a look at all the dailies we have for you this morning. But we'll be back in a moment to take on some major issues for the day. Please stay with us. Well, the failure of the president to appear before the National Assembly is still raising so much controversy and conversation. Call it debate, and you may not be wrong, especially because this was not just a random invite. It was about security following the gruesome killing of over 40 farmers in Borno State. So this morning, we're taking a look at the issues that have come up and hopefully to get a sense of it, security-wise, legally speaking. And joining us to do that is Senior Advocate of Nigeria, John Odubela. He joins us via Zoom from Lagos. And here in our studio, we have Lieutenant Commander John Danjuma, former Navy Intelligence Officer. Good morning, gentlemen, and thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you very much.
Senior Advocate, let me begin with you. Great to have you. Let me begin with you because, listening to the representatives at the National Assembly, it will seem they are even divided, really, regarding the constitutionality or whether the president should have appeared or not. So, just for one more time, help us understand this. Was it wrong for the House of Representatives to have invited the president to address them, and by extension the nation, on security issues?
Well, thank you very much for having me this morning. I think if we begin with the provisions of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, 1999 as amended, particularly provision of sections 88 and 89, you will find from section 88 that the National Assembly, either of the two houses, whether it is the Senate or the House of Rep, has the power, after they must have passed the resolution, to invite and investigate matters that they have powers to legislate on. And then if we relate it to the current issue, which has to do with security, we all know that the federal government has that duty and responsibility to protect the lives and securities of the citizens. And we all know the challenge that we have been facing of recent, particularly on security. So the National Assembly, by the provisions of Section 88, has that power to, since the Armed Forces Act are the part of the powers of the National Assembly, which they legislate on, and of course, security being on the exclusive list of the National Assembly, they will have the power, I believe, to investigate and invite any person on authority. But I think what is key is that there are some conditions that are precedent. First of all, we know that the issue at stake is security. And of course, under the Armed Forces Act, the president has the responsibility of deploying or overseeing the armed forces. So they have that power, provided, and that is very key, that the issue that the National Assembly is interested in, and which they only have the power to invite the president, is that if the intention is to amend the laws, maybe there are present challenges as the laws stand, and their intentions or their motives is to amend that law, maybe to overcome those challenges, then they will have that power. Because the Constitution is very clear that the intention and the motive of that investigation is to ensure that maybe they have challenges as the law is, and they are investigating the best way to improve. For example, now, I know it has been an issue on the service chiefs. Many people have called that they should be removed and replaced. If the power rests exclusively on the president, who is the commander-in-chief. If what they feel is that the power conferred on the president, particularly on the appointment and removal of the service chiefs, are not helping the law, and they intend that maybe they want to take that law away from the president or to other, I don't know, then if that is made clearer that this is the motive to improve on the law, then I believe the National Assembly will have the power to invite Mr. President to appear in the course of that investigation.
Right, because, I mean, the House of Reps was quite clear on that invitation. In fact, we had the Speaker visit the President to speak to him, which is why the President gave his commitment. I mean, through the Speaker, we saw the aide to the President also giving that commitment, in fact, given a date. So clearly, it wasn't as though the President was not clear on what he was being invited to speak on. But let me take your opening comments. Now, first, let me ask you, were you disappointed that the President did not show up at the House of Reps?
I wouldn't say I was disappointed, because it is in his character to do that. If you remember, during the Oputa panel set up by General Obasanjo both General Ibrahim Babangida and himself were invited, and they didn't show. They didn't go there. And even Oputa himself, the late Oputa, tried to rationalize it and say, well, the status of this court is just that of a high court. But the real truth is this. They had disobeyed the orders and authority of a standing president duly elected by the Nigerian people. So it is in the character of some people in Nigeria not to realize that institutions must be respected and they should show examples. I remember in 1999 the then Minister of Defense was invited by the Senate. He refused to go. So it is consistent with the nature and behavior of our people. And they need to realize anyway that if you break the law, then you have no moral authority to bring other people below you who break the law too. Because you are now sending negative signals into the society, telling them that you are above the law.
So you think the president broke the law by this act?
Of course, it's inconsistent with the democratic norms. In US, for example, when the Toyota, there was a Toyota that was causing deaths, maybe I think it had problems with the throttle. The American, Congress, invited Mr. Toyota from Japan. Believe me, he left his country and went to answer to them. Because the American people, stand as number one. And the Nigerian people, duly represented by the members of the National Assembly, should stand as number one. And they must be respected. So, for me, it was more than a big disappointment.
There were talks about the format in which this visit or planned appearance was going to take. There were questions about whether it was going to be an address, an interaction, or a closed session because of the peculiarity of the security discussions. For you, because, there were some arguments that the president might not be able to divulge some information. So, seeing that peculiarity, what format do you think this should have taken? Because there are talks that maybe the president might even appear eventually. So, what format should this have taken, maybe?
Some people are saying that the official way of inviting Mr. President was to write to him and for him to respond, telling them when he would come, and then finally get there. But for God's sake, this is about national security. You placed your hand on the Quran and promised the Nigerian people that you were going to do everything, all within your powers as the president, to preserve them, to protect them. And here is a situation where you would have shined. It's an opportunity for you to shine, to tell the people what you already know that they don't know. That, look, this is the situation. But so I think, and there is so much mystery about operations that we need to demystify here. It is only ongoing operations, or the ones you are planning ahead, that need to be, shrouded in secrecy and kept, within locked doors. But something that has already happened, what you have done before, if you take the members of the National Assembly along with you, it is in your own interest. It is a plus for you. But now by cutting them off, look at the division. Some people are for and others are against. So for me, we are not handling this situation well at all, because lives are lost, people are hurting, and it's time to speak to them, to comfort them, to console them and make them feel, part of the system.
Because what the Attorney General, the statement he put out just before Thursday was that an invitation that seeks to put the operational use of the armed forces to a public interrogation is indeed taking the constitutional rights of lawmaking beyond bounds. But clearly you say that he doesn't have to disclose things being done or the plans in the future. They can always talk about the things they did in the past, right?
Correct.
Okay, let me go back to the senior advocate. So, Lieutenant Commander here is speaking about a precedent. He has drawn similarities between what played out in the United States. So what sort of precedents does this set, really, between the executive and the National Assembly, particularly for the National Assembly's powers to summon individuals, any Nigerian, regarding any issue?
Well, I don't see any big deal here because our constitution is very clear. And I don't see reasons why our president should not go to the National Assembly to explain the situation. For me, I think it's even a very rare opportunity because we all know the current situation, particularly in terms of security. So I believe Mr. President should look at it again and see it as an opportunity, because what are they going to ask him that he cannot explain? The best they can explain is that what is happening, and he should be able to explain to them. I don't believe the operational use or the current status of the equipment of our armed forces are issues that cannot be discussed. Because what we are saying is that the representatives of the country, the Senate and the House of Rep, are the people inviting Mr. President. So I believe Mr. President will have the opportunity to explain through those representatives the efforts that have been put in place. You may not even know, maybe better suggestions will come from the floor of the House, because nobody has monopoly of knowledge. And I think it's an opportunity for Mr. President to go to the House of Rep to explain the circumstances and the journey so far.
Well, Mr. Odubela, the question, I want to find out from you what you think when you cite the, circumstances and conditions that you have talked about as to the justification for the president appearing or not appearing before the National Assembly. For you, the inability of the president to appear and the issues that arose from him not appearing, the letter from the AGF's office and the opposition by the APC governors, for you, is it a question of morality or legality?
Well, I think it's both, because I believe that there are no questions that will come from the National Assembly or from the House of Rep that Mr. President cannot answer. You see, because in terms of legal, if you look at it from the legal point of view, even though the three arms of government are separate, but they also have mutual understanding and respect for one another. So if the National Assembly of the House of Rep invites Mr. President to come and chat or discuss the national security, I think it's an opportunity for Mr. President to go there and answer the questions that may be put forward. And I think morally too, you see, if we look at the number of people that have lost their lives as a result of this insecurity, I think Mr. President even owes the country, Nigerians too, to go there. Because I was reading that they were saying that some PDP members, they wanted to embarrass Mr. President by various questions. I don't believe that. If you ask questions, there is also leadership of the House. There's decorum. We already have the subject matter for discussion.
Well, just a quick one, Mr. Odubela. Let's stay on the legality for a while. You have said that it would have been an opportunity, but speaking from the legal perspective, strictly now, did the president flout any law? Did he contravene any aspect of the Constitution fundamentally by not appearing before the National Assembly yesterday?
Well, if you talk about legally, you see, if you look at it from the provisions of Section 88 and 89, that confers power on the National Assembly to invite or summon anyone, particularly those that are in the position of executing the laws of the National Assembly. For instance, now, is the Mr. President, who is the commander-in-chief, that is in that position of authority to carry out those duties and functions under the Armed Forces Act. If you look at it strictly from the legal point of view, then the National Assembly has that power to summon Mr. President. And for me, I have not seen any justification, with due respect, for Mr. President to turn out such invitation, because I've not seen any law that the National Assembly has acted outside. They've only acted within their constitutional power under Sections 88 and 89. And what I think maybe
Mr. Lubela,
have not seen.
Yeah, since it was an invitation, and as you said, I mean, it would have been an opportunity for the president. Should there be a consequence for such an occurrence when the president or anyone turns down the invitation of the National Assembly? It is clear, just as you said, any person in government can be summoned by the National Assembly. In the event that someone does not obey that invitation or comply with that invitation of the National Assembly, what is the legal consequence, if any?
Well, I think if you talk about legal consequence, particularly with executive members that have immunity, I think then we're talking of some limitations, because Mr. President, the Vice President have immunity under the Constitution. So I think the only option that I think the National Assembly will have is that, since the issue, the subject matter under which they've invited Mr. President is security, which is very paramount to our country. And I want to believe that if it's taken to an extreme, it may become an impeachable offense for Mr. President to just defy the invitation. So I think everything is still with the National Assembly, because they can then exercise their power under the Constitution too, because we're talking of people under the executive powers, under the executive authority. So I believe that the National Assembly can go back and look at their other powers too under the Constitution, and then see whether they will not exercise such powers. Because if Mr. President is attending, I think there should be good and reasonable reasons, but not just to turn down such invitation, particularly when the subject has to do with the security of the people of this country.
All right, thank you. Let me ask Commander Danjuma. Many people also hold the opinion that what Mr. President would have gone to say at the National Assembly would probably have been not more than a regurgitation of the things that have been said before. Rejig the security architecture, collaboration of security officials, security apparatus of the nation and all of that, and improve local intelligence, what he told the governors. These are some of the things that he would have said. And perhaps also maybe talk about the number of things concerning the funding of security apparatus of the nation. All of that have already gone out. How significant is it that the president didn't appear when the opinion is also out there, if at all he would have said anything new that haven't been said before that could see to the improvement of security of lives and property in Nigeria.
Well, does that not border on the conjecture? How can you answer a question that has not been asked? And how can you know that this is a question that will be asked? You know, we don't go by conjectures. We don't assume, you know, to know the minds of people. For me, the real issue is, does Mr. President care about how he is perceived by the Nigerian people? Most people now, if you really ask them, feel that he is unconcerned about the feelings of the people. You know, times like this when people are hurting is when you, as a leader, you know, should show empathy. You know, should even visit the families. You know, there's nothing wrong in the president, you know, going to the National Assembly and even regurgitating, if that is what it will take. You know, after all, they say repetition makes for impression. It will further impress that he truly cares about the Nigerian people. So, for me, it is neither here nor there. And there is still time for Mr. President to have a change of heart and to listen to the voice of reason, you know, and to want to please people. When he was campaigning, for example, he went into the nooks and crannies. He wanted to meet the locals, to shake hands with them, interact with them. You know, now that he has got into the seat, it will not augur well for him to appear as if, okay, I've got all I want. You can now, you know. So that's just a word of advice to him, and he should not take every advice of those around him as gospel. Sometimes you should balance it with the advice of people who are not so close to him.
You know, fundamentally, this discussion about the president failing to appear before the House of Representatives is basically about security. So when we come back from this break, which we need to take now, we'll focus on that aspect of security. I mean, what we have seen happen and how we can really do better in specific terms now. Please stay with us. Senior Advocate of Nigeria, John Odubela, as well as Lieutenant Commander John Danjuma, former Navy intelligence officer, still with us on the program this morning. Lieutenant Commander, let me come to you regarding the issue of service chiefs, because it has been in the talks for a while now. You heard the Minister of Defense saying they've not made any fundamental error, as it were. So this call for the sacking of service chiefs, on what basis do you think it should be on?
You know, on many bases, on many counts, you know. In the first place, after a specific period of time on any given task or position, you lose ideas. You just keep on recycling what you did. That is why even Mr. President himself has only 8 years to do, after which he will go. You know, so new ways of doing things is one reason that we need a change, you know, in the, why we clamor, or why many, in fact, I don't know of any institution or progressive group of people that have not asked Mr. President to please let these people go. And I suspect within me that these people too, they are saying, look, what do I really want more? You know, I want to go. But it's not in the military tradition for you to go, you know, to Mr. President and say, I want to resign at that height, you know. So I think maybe to be fair to them, that if they resign, well, come to think of it, why not? Why can't you go to Mr. President and say, look, I want to go. You've already got all what you want. Anyway, to answer your question, the morale, I want to tell you, even I, though he called me the other day and was scared, one of my classmates, the last one that left, we were thinking that he would make the chief of naval staff. Actually, because it is to you a thing of pride for a member of your course, to rise to that height. So imagine the number of courses that have missed that opportunity. So it has a direct effect on the morale. No one should deceive you that the morale of a fighting force is nothing to, it is the number one thing. The fight in the dog, is very important.
What about this argument about changing leadership during war? The defense minister also talked about that. What are your thoughts?
Does it not surprise you that this ragtag army of the Boko Haram is holding the Nigerian army to task all these years? Is that the real issue? If we really dig deep, we may find out that there are some interests that want this war to continue, not because the Boko Haram cannot be trashed, in a short while, but because of some other interests, that may be getting to them. So this ragtag army, what capability, what capacity do they have? So for me, in fact, that cannot be a consideration that because there is a war going, which war? The only war we see is the war where Nigerians are plucked like flies. Their life has no more meaning to the Nigerian people. These are the areas that we should talk about. It's not only Boko Haram. When people are traveling and the skill, the skill it takes for you to fire at a moving target and to puncture a tire, So the point is this. If
You're referring to the Kaduna-Abuja expressway?
Yes, the one that happened yesterday, that the governor is saying it was only a bust tire, So daily, if we don't check these criminal acts, people are acquiring greater skills. They are getting more money. They are buying better equipment. They are getting better organized, and things are getting worse. So it is important that we really face this issue of security, because without security, nothing else will work.
Well, my colleague in Abuja has...
Let me ask you this question. One of the things that a number of people have also indicated is that, look, there's something that you would also remember. Time was when soldiers at the forefront would protest, would complain that they didn't have things to work with, they didn't have their pay, they didn't have their welfare taken, due care of. But we haven't heard that in quite a while. Some also would argue that isn't that some testament to the stability that has come to the military as a result of the leadership that many people are complaining about now?
Well, this is an opportunity for me to say that my pension is going on. At the month end, I collect my pension. And now I'm not aware also that people are not receiving their pay. But it goes over and beyond that. It is not only your pay, that is important, but you're fighting as one. Your oneness, to fight. In theory, what we learn in theory is the army coming in close proximity with any local population will always result into friction, a lot of friction. They are not likely to gain the sympathy or even the loyalty of the people. So the job of the police, they say, the job of the police is to protect, while the job of the army or the military is to take care of your enemy. If you now take the army and want him to protect or to do the job of a police, he will now treat those people as enemies, unconsciously. You know, so
which underscores something else now, Commander, which underscores one other issue that a number of people have also raised, and I don't know if you're aware of it. On the one hand, well, I'll come to the aspect of the police in a while, but there is something that the coordinator of defense media said when we had a conversation with him before. He said when we asked him the same question about whether or not new thinking would come if the service chiefs were replaced, and his opinion was that in the military they operate a bottoms-up system, a bottoms-up approach. So many of the ideas that will be used on the field come from the people on the field, and they only, offer policy guidance and support and operational tactics and the rest of them just to support. So from where you sit as a former, military officer, knowing these things, what is your take on that? And how significant do you think a bottoms-up approach has been or can be in the event that we haven't been using it well enough in the fight against all levels of insurgency, especially as concerns the military?
Well, I actually listened to that interview. I watched when you asked and the answers that he gave. And my response is this. It's the head that does the thinking, and it's the head that directs the body about how to go and where to go. So there is no way you can say that the thinking of the head, can be done by the other members. The military is not a democratic organization. Or, yes, where you now say, okay, majority carries the vote. There are a group of senior officers around you, the chief, that would sit down with you, and determine the direction that you go. Which is not to say, of course, that you don't listen to the yearnings or the ideas of those who are below. But at the end of the day, it is the head, the chief of Army Staff or Navy or Air Force, and the officers, the staff officers, very senior officers around them that end up making the decisions. So it is still very important also that the direction, in intelligence, it starts with the direction. And the direction starts with the number one person. You determine the direction that everybody will go. So if you keep on giving the direction, and now the direction has not yielded the corresponding results or the needed results, and you are removed and another person gets in there, definitely a different direction will be taken, which may prove of benefit to the Nigerian people.
Well, a number of questions, would also surround that, because the question then somebody will say is, look, we have had change of leadership in the country over time. These are all permutations that so many people are coming up with, and one is wondering. But, at the end of the day, just as Kayode said before we went on break, this is about security of lives and property, and that is what is challenged. Right now, we are talking about insurgency. There is that conversation about, us over-policing the military, while the police itself is, not as we would love for it to be. Time was when we had different levels of security, of policemen operationally in Nigeria. We had the police, we had the MOPO, we had those who carried firearms, we had those who just bore maybe sticks and stuff like that. How significant, in your opinion, is the fact that we do not have the police as structured as we had it in years past, such that we now have to engage soldiers in doing or performing the functions of the police in these areas where banditry seems to be prevalent?
Yeah, it's unfortunate that since 1999, there is a group to which I belong that has always been saying that any federation that has only one single line of policing, cannot meet the security of that nation. Nigeria is the only federation that has only the Nigeria police. So how can one single line of policing, which is static, meet the dynamic needs, the ever-changing security situation in the country? So it has been a big gap. Why are there ungovernable areas and ungoverned areas within the country? It's because even at the localities, there is no presence or protection for the people. How can maybe 400,000 people, police, even 100 million, not to talk of 200 million. So we need to look again at how the policing system is done in federations all over the world, and then follow suit. This single line of policing whereby you will direct people to all the nooks and crannies of Nigeria with only, it's not possible. It cannot work. And let me even go further and say something. From what we have seen security-wise, we have crystallized it, and we have said that any security system that cannot prevent bad people from carrying guns to kill people must not prevent good people from carrying guns to protect themselves. Nothing stops localities from having guns. You go there, you train them on how to handle guns. All these farming communities, it is important to note that if such communities were armed and trained to handle weapons, the propensity of them being attacked, and even if they are attacked, for them to be wiped off, will be very less. Even the deterrent effect of these criminals, knowing that they will also face fire, will be enough for them to think twice before going. This has, the American system has worked very well because it does not prevent you, either individually or corporately, from carrying guns to protect yourself. The journey is already out of the bottle. There is no way that you can mop up all the small arms within the Nigerian context, within this country. It's not possible. Let's stop deceiving ourselves. So since the guns are in the hands of bad people, there is nothing wrong in now registering communities, training them how to protect themselves. And I'm telling you, that's a possible way to bringing down the high rate of criminality within our communities.
That will maybe see also given the likes of Amotekun the powers to carry stronger firepower, maybe.
Yeah, the Amotekun own is a bit different, slightly different, because this one is community-based. Every community, should be able to protect itself. Amotekun is more or less regional, if I get it correctly. So the idea actually is that once you are able to protect yourself, now look at the situation. The response time is very, very long because of the distance between where the policemen are and where the attacks are taking place. But if now you are armed within your house, the confidence level, is okay. So
Okay.
Yeah, that's it. That's
okay. Let's take on Mr. Odubela and some of the issues you have raised. First, with the issue of sacking of the service chiefs or keeping them, there's been a lot of back and forth about the legalities. Some say the president is breaking the law, and they use the rules of civil service. So, looking at the laws really and the continued keeping of the service chiefs, do you think the president is breaking any law, or this is within his right to keep the service chiefs?
Well, I think looking at the present laws as they stand now, I will say that I don't think Mr. President is breaking any laws because, of course, there are statutory age for them to retire or after a certain number of years. And at the same time, there are also laws that also allow Mr. President to also extend certain years for certain categories of people. But again, That's take us to the point that who are the people that have made these laws? They are the National Assembly. And if they feel that the present situation do not allow or will not accord good governance with the laws as they stand now, they have such powers to amend that laws. If the situations as we see now do not, they believe that, look, the service chiefs have overstayed. And of course, there are laws that justify their continue staying in office. And the National Assembly feel that they need to review those laws. And maybe for that reason, that could have been part of the reasons why they are inviting Mr. President. I think since they are the one that made that laws, they are the one that they can also amend and even take all these powers from Mr. President. If we look at under the Armed Forces Act, particularly Section 8, that make the chairman, Mr. President as the chairman of the council and has the overall control of the operational use of the armed forces. If the National Assembly feel that, look, the situation we have at hand has not been very positive with the way the events are going with these current laws, and they feel that there needs to amend such laws, they have the powers to do that. So I want to believe that for the good governance, I believe that both the legislative arm and the executive arm must work hand in hand. And that is why I believe that both arms should have mutual respect for each other, and that that is the best way that we could have a good governance, we could have good laws that will govern our country.
Bella, just a quick one. So far, and most of the time when we talk about security or insecurity in the country, most of the time our eyes are on the federal capital. We're looking to the office of the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. But it's the same constitution that says the responsibility of provision of security for lives and property resides with the governors as well. Now, that is in the constitution, and quite a number of the governors have often, indicated that they feel arm-twisted by not being able to do some of the things that they would have loved to do to ensure the security of lives and property of the people who live within their terrain. What laws, where we know that the police is there, Mr. Commander John has also indicated that there is a need for us to decentralize the police. Beyond the decentralizing of the police that so many people have talked about, what other laws do you think need to be amended or promulgated or created to facilitate effective provision of security by the governors in their various states?
Yes, thank you very much. As the law stand now, whether you are looking at the Police Act or you are looking at the Armed Forces Act, and security, particularly in line with the police and the armed forces, you found out that you can only find them in the exclusive list, indicate or who has that responsibility.
Okay.
Of course, they'll say that state governors are the security officers of their various states, but you find out that people have been clamoring for state police that the federal government.
Well, we'll try to stabilize that hopefully before this session is over. But Commander John, let me also ask you that same question. How about we decentralize? You've already referenced it earlier. In your opinion, what is hindering us from decentralizing the police to the states and even to the local government levels? There is the community policing policy of the Nigeria Police Force, but with the control still being at the center, how effective, in your own opinion, do you think that can be?
I think that the Nigerian constitution, or those who wrote it, have this desire to control everything within sight, you know, and anything that has to do with over-centralization, you know, will lead to corruption and cannot really work. You know, one person, one single inspector general of police cannot police Nigeria. You know, we need 3 levels of policing, you know, and in fact, in parts of the world, they even elect policemen at the localities, you know, so there has to be, you know, interaction. There has to be a connection between you and the people that you are policing. If they take you from the north and you only understand Hausa, and they take you to the west and you are to police the people that speak Yoruba, in all probability, you are going to make a mess of the job. So,
if I could just
go ahead.
button, as we wind down, we have about 30 seconds, but I just wanted you to respond to this before we close on the topic. Now, the president is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. There are calls for the sacking of the service chiefs. Do you think it's fair on the service chiefs because they actually get directions and directives from the president?
We are talking about the security of the Nigerian people. If the reason for the chiefs, you know, why people are asking for the chiefs to go is because the people are not, the security of the people is not at its peak. If people are not well taken care of, and that is the reason for the service chiefs to go, why not? Everything should center around the people, you know. So for me, the feelings of the service chiefs do not come into play at this time.
So you don't think the bulk stops at the table of the president? You think it stops at the service chiefs' tables?
You're getting me wrong. No, the buck must always stop at the table of Mr. President. It is his responsibility to take care of the security of the people. And if now there are calls to Mr. President to let the service chiefs go because they are not performing at peak,
based on the directives he has given them.
Yes, and what people also want. It is, in fact, this desire is for the people. We are not looking at Mr. President. We are looking at what Mr. President is supposed to do to protect the people, and the people he has asked to protect the people are not really performing.
I think I may have opened another vista of conversation here, but
okay,
Lieutenant Commander John Danjuma, former Navy intelligence officer, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts as usual, as well as Senior Advocate of Nigeria, John Dubela, who joins us via Zoom from Ogun State. Thank you so much as well.
Thank you very much for having us.
We'll be back after this break for another discussion. Please stay with us.
Well, clearly, work has begun, just as we have heard the INEC chairman say. And, of course, as he has also said, it's historic. We are never going to have the last of firsts happening, and this is the first time we're having the second term for an INEC chairman in the country. Well, how significant is this, and how helpful is it going to be in the entire scheme of things as far as our elections or electoral process is concerned? Mr. Clement Nwankwo joins us this morning virtually. He is the Executive Director, Policy and Legal Advocacy Center. He is also convener of Civil Society Room. Thank you for joining us this morning, Mr. Nwankwo. Well, it's historic. It's a first. Is this significant to you? How significant is it?
Thank you very much. First, to correct, I served out my term as convener of the Situation Room more than 3 weeks ago, and Esther Uzoma is now the new convener of the Nigerian Civil Society Situation Room. Secondly, I think that going towards 2023, it is significant because you will be having an INEC chairman who will have no need to bother about a reappointment. Under the laws, an INEC chairman can only be reappointed once, and here that once has been achieved. And I think it's significant First of all, there were issues with the 2019 general elections, and we complained about it, we protested it, we said that it did not meet the thresholds for credible elections, and that remains the position of the Situation Room groups. But going ahead, I think that lessons have been taken. I think we have communicated, and a lot of observers did communicate their concerns about the 2019 elections. And we know that there has been a lot of conversations, a lot of review of the 2019 general elections. INEC has done so under the new present chairman. And I think lessons have been taken. People have spoken to each other. People have understood where the shortcomings were. And looking forward, we know that it is important and significant that you have an experienced chairman of the Electoral Commission who has learnt the ropes, who has understood a lot of what the criticisms were of the 2019 general elections. And we've seen some improvements with off-cycle elections that have taken place, particularly the elections in Edo and Ondo. We have seen some improvements. And we believe that looking forward, with an experienced chairman, with an experienced commission, there will be significant changes. But it's also important not to overlook the fact that there are national commissioners in the commission who have experience and who have tenures that are due. And I'm looking particularly also at the fact that there are women national commissioners whose tenures have expired, who may not have been renominated, which is quite worrying. You cannot have a commission where you do not have a significant number of women in its membership. And I am worried that with respect to some of the positions which women occupied in the commission, that they have not been renominated. I think this is unacceptable, and the commission and the government needs to review some of the new nominations that have been made to ensure that women who have experienced elections, who are in the commission, are renominated back to the commission.
Well, what you have just said now, Mr. Nwoko, indicates that perhaps there are some other workings in the engine of our electoral system that many people do not see. And you've just cited the fact that there are national electoral commissioners that may or may not have been reappointed. Are there other things in the electoral engine of Nigeria's political experience or democratic experience that are not known to people, but are as critical as that of the INEC commissioners that you just referenced there? Are there some others like that?
Yes, I think also that we need to look at the fact that there is credibility questions about the National Voters Register. I do know that there is continuous talk of continuous voter registration, but what is the basis of it? In 2010, when we were talking about moving towards digital capture of names and creation of a voters register, machines were purchased. Some of them, what is called the DD, the direct data capture machines, were purchased. Of course, they have a lifespan. We need to go back and check what the integrity of the direct data capture machines are today, to be sure that they are in line with improvements that have come in. We do know also, and it's very significant, and it was very helpful listening to the newly reappointed chairman of the commission making his comment at the Villa, saying he was going right to the National Assembly to join the public hearing that took place yesterday, looking at repealing and reenacting a new electoral law for Nigeria. And I think that's the right way to go for the National Assembly, to repeal and reenact, because at this time we have more than 4 amendments to the existing law. Some of these versions of laws have been mutilated and are not compiled and held in one volume. So when you go to courts and you are citing some of these laws, even the judges have difficulty in assessing some of this. So I think that's the right direction. But there are provisions in the Electoral Act 2010 that need to be updated.
I'm sure we'll get to some of those nitty-gritty, but if I can just take you to one other leg of our electoral process, well, what we are talking about today is improving Nigeria's electoral process using the microcosm of the INEC chairman's reappointment in the conversation. But then there is the state independent electoral commissions who organize elections into local governments. And you would probably be as concerned about several people as so many other people are concerned about the believability, the credibility of elections at the local government level. What are we missing at that point, at that level of our democratic experience, and what needs to be done, especially as you talk about this Electoral Act?
I think that there is a problem with the federal character system or the system of government in Nigeria, to the point that the lower you get, the less accountable government becomes. And at the state level, state governors have no qualms about doing what they like. And it's not just the state independent electoral commissions that are tools in the hands of the governors in the state. It's also the State House of Assembly, where elected legislators at state levels are again also tools in the hand of government in the state. So we need to see, how do we hold governors to account? How do we ensure that governors account to citizens who have elected them at the state level? How do we ensure and hold them to account for respecting constitutional provisions regarding the extent of their powers? When local council elections are held in states, you find that the state that the party that controls the state government wins virtually every seat. If any wins at all, other than the ruling party in the state, it's a concession or it's very hard fought. So I think that we have to go and ask ourselves, and again, some of the suggestions that have been put on the table raises questions about the federal nature of the country. But again, sometimes you need emergency measures to deal with the situation. And that's why some proposals have been made about creating an independent state electoral commissions, which means that apart from INEC, which deals with national elections, and it should be kept so, that you do have a national agency created to conduct state council, local council elections. And these body would be independent, would have nominations from the various states, but also independent persons who would be in this commission and who would conduct elections around the states such that they are not under the influence of a governor, with sufficient provisions made to fund them away from the governor, but also to guarantee their independence. And unless this is done, you're not going to see a situation where governors respect the independence of electoral commissions in the states.
Forgive me, Mr. Nwankwo, but it would suggest that perhaps there is some law somewhere or some unwritten code that puts the state independent electoral commissions under the governor of the state. Is there such a thing?
There's no such law. State independent electoral commissions are provided for in the Nigerian Constitution. It is to be set up in the same way as INEC is set up, with the governor making the nominations and the state houses of assembly approving those nominations. But in reality, most state houses of assembly are in the pockets of the governor. The governor appoints who he chooses. Most times, even some of those appointed into state electoral commissions are party elements who go in there and who take instructions from the governor about who is even qualified to run for council elections. They wait to be given appropriation by the state, and where the governor is not comfortable with an electoral commission in the state, no appropriation is made. The State House of Assembly are not able to question the governor. So I think the impunity and powers of governors is really part of the challenge that you see with respect to credible elections at state levels.
Looking into the future and considering the Electoral Act that the National Assembly has promised would be ready by the first quarter of next year, what has to be included? What safeguards should be included in that law to ensure that state governors do not take undue advantage of whatever it is that they're taking advantage of now, and that can help to strengthen the institutions at the local government level so that the people can be better served at that level?
There are two conversations here. One is Electoral Act repeal and reenactment law at the National Assembly, and we listened to the Senate President, Dr. Ahmad Lawan, speak yesterday and commit to the National Assembly passing a new Electoral Act before the end of the first quarter, which would be before the end of March of 2021. Now, that law does not deal with state council elections. The only way that you can get alterations to the prevailing legal regime for council elections now will be through constitution alteration. The National Assembly has started the process, and we hope that the National Assembly provides the opportunity for citizens to be able to make contributions to discussions around the issue of local council elections, indeed, even autonomy of local governments, because again, that's a major issue. That local governments get appropriation from the federal accounts, and by the time it gets to them, a lot of it has been dissipated by the governor's interference with the way the finances of the local councils are used for development. So there's a whole lot of conversation, and the 8th National Assembly tried to address this by making provisions for the independence and autonomy of local councils. And President Muhammad Buhari has also raised these questions. I do know that there has been questions. The president has very strongly insisted on the issue of autonomy, financial and political autonomy of local councils. But this has not come to see the light of the day. And we think that it is time for the president, for the executive at the national level, to put its foot down and support and pursue constitutional alteration that truly gives independence and protects the ability of local councils to function and deliver on development. Unless this is done, we are just going to see that local councils would be departments in the office of governors in the states.
Well, quite a number of issues you have touched on, and let me see if I could take some of them that jumped at me. First, with the nomination of the national commissioners, you have said that there are some people that have not been renominated, but in the same vein, some have been nominated to fill in those positions. And you did have an issue with one of those nominees, just like a lot of other Nigerians. And I'd like you to just speak to the fact that, I mean, the government in power decides who will be national commissioners, and even the chairman of INEC. I mean, that's a commission that essentially should be neutral. So isn't that being a judge in one's own case? Does the Electoral Act Amendment Bill put that into consideration, maybe such that we can have some form of neutrality in the appointment of those that will head our electoral umpire?
I think there were suggestions made. There have been various reviews of the electoral regime in this country. Justice Mohammed Lawal Uwais, who headed the committee, the Electoral Reform Committee that was set up by former President Yar'Adua, did come up with recommendations about the mode of appointment of INEC officials and indeed the chairman of the commission. And that was never followed. But of course, you had Professor Tahiru Jaga appointed by the president, and virtually everyone agreed that he did a very good job being INEC chairman. I think that the opportunity is there, even if the president appoints, the opportunity is there, and even more so now that the president is not seeking re-election, that you have an experienced national chairman coming for INEC, that they can be independent. The ideal, yes, would be that people are appointed into INEC by an independent process. And in some countries, people apply, they go through scrutiny, applications are reviewed, and as applications are reviewed, people are able to then take things forward. And that process is independent of executive influence. So I think that these are challenges that this country needs to deal with. But my hope, and the reason I mentioned the nominations and renominations is really that where you do have a woman who has done very well as a national commissioner and her tenure is due, there is no reason why that woman should not be renominated. And that's the circumstance that we're faced with at this time, that you do have some persons in the commission, particularly a woman who has done very well, who has not been renominated. I think this is sad. Relating to other appointments, I think the only reason that the Situation Room and indeed other stakeholders raised concerns about a particular nomination has nothing to do with the character or person of the individual nominated. It was simply that the person nominated is an aide to the president, is obviously very partisan in terms of political affiliations, and you cannot, in the light of perception, but also reality, nominate a card-carrying member or a partisan person into the Electoral Commission. And our hope is that this concern is being addressed. It has nothing to do with the individual, and it's nothing personal.
A couple of other issues really to talk about, especially what to expect in the coming years as we prepare towards 2023. And you were also at that joint public hearing. So just to give people an insight into what happened and what to expect. But we need to go on a break now. When we return, we'll take your concluding thoughts. Please stay with us. Welcome back. Well, Mr. Nwako, you were at that joint public hearing by the National Assembly regarding the Electoral Act Amendment Bill. And, you know, for a lot of Nigerians who were not there, looking at the provisions, if I could say, updates to the law, would you say they constitute the silver bullet we need to end electoral malpractice and all the discrepancies we have seen so far in our electoral process?
No, I think the silver bullet is a change in the behavior of the individual, a change in the behavior of those who manage politics, a change in the behavior of those who present themselves for election, and indeed a change in the character of those who run elections. But looking at the provisions of the proposed repeal and reenactment law, there are significant improvements. And if you do remember the elections in 2019, the key question was whether the server was going to be made available for evidence during the litigation that was going on. And I think when you look at Section 49 right up to Section 52, which talks about the procedure for actual casting of votes, the provision that emphasized the manual nature and character of voting has now been altered, and it provides clearly that you could introduce a lot of technology, and not just the question of using the thumbprint in card reader machines or even electronically creating a voter's register, but it even has a latitude of expanding, and indeed the Commission has been talking about electronic voting. I don't know how quickly we get there, and we need to be very cautious, but I think it's so very important that we are already talking and have seen the implementation of a factor in this, which is the direct transmission of results from polling units to a central capture point. I think all of these means of capturing evidence, but not forgetting the importance of the paper trail, would help to improve our elections. I think also given, and again, the draft bill, I hope, and we do know that the committees are looking at wide consultations, and we hope that these consultations happen over the next 2-3 months. But we do hope that it also captures all of the issues related to how aspirants contest the primaries in the parties and how candidates emerge, because I think that's part of the biggest failings of our political system, that people are not given a fair opportunity to run in the primaries and to emerge through a transparent process. A lot of it is clouded by money influence and by the overbearing nature of those who are in strategic positions ahead of the elections. So all of these, I think, becomes really important for us to look at as we look at alterations to the Electoral Act, to ensure that as much legal individual influence is exercised to subvert the system. And I think that if we can get this right, if we can get the nomination process right, if we can get the voters register right, because again, I would want to make the point that we must have a voters register that we're all very proud of. And at this time, I think we need to voters register and get a sense of how we need to make it much more credible.
Well, clearly, our work is cut out for us right there, Mr. Nwankwo. We have to thank you very much. Apparently, it's something of similar concern to the INEC chairman, because he has also mentioned that that's one of his priorities, to ensure I will clean up the electoral register. But we have to thank you very much for this morning. This conversation is not over. We definitely have to sustain it. Clement Nwankwo is Executive Director, Policy and Legal Advocacy Center. He joins us virtually from Abuja. Thank you so much again. Well, this is the March of Sunrise Daily for today and this week. It's been wonderful. Thank you for your time and thank you for watching. I'm Ayo Makinde. Have a wonderful day and enjoy your weekend.
And thank you for those tweets, by the way. I've been looking through them. This one from Onokmemikpo talking about his experience at the police station, I think in Ogudu, Lagos State. Thank you so much for being a part of this program. I'm Kaido Kikilu. Have a great day.